The year is 1900, and the scientific world has settled into a comfortable, arrogant certainty. In the grand libraries of Europe and the Ivy League halls of America, a singular, unshakable dogma reigns supreme: the concept of the biological machine. The prevailing wisdom, endorsed by the titans of biology and carved into the bedrock of textbooks, declared that the insect world was a realm of darkness, void of thought, void of memory, and absolutely void of consciousness. Insects were viewed as automata, sophisticated clockwork toys made of chitin and fluid, programmed by nature to perform a set series of reflexes and nothing more. To suggest that a bee could decide or that an ant could remember was not just scientifically inaccurate, it was considered a romantic delusion, a career-ending heresy for any serious researcher. This was the wall built by the establishment. It was a convenient lie that elevated humanity by stripping the rest of the animal kingdom of its dignity. It comforted the Victorian mind to believe that intelligence was a spark reserved solely for the higher orders. Yet history is often written in the margins, and truth has a habit of hiding in the shadows where the giants refuse to look. While the celebrated professors of the age lectured from their podiums about the mindless nature of the lower orders, a quiet revolution was brewing, not in a gleaming university laboratory, but in the observant mind of a man whom the establishment had already decided to ignore. Charles Henry Turner entered this rigid world with a perspective that was dangerous to the status quo. He saw what others refused to see. Where his contemporaries saw biological robots executing code, Turner saw hesitation, choice, and adaptation. But Turner faced a dual blockade. He was fighting against the scientific dogma of the automaton, but he was also fighting a much more insidious, systemic wall, the color line. As a black man in turn-of-the-century America, his intellect was viewed by the scientific community with the same skepticism they applied to the insect mind: underestimated, dismissed, and deemed incapable of complex thought. The archives of history whisper a tragedy here. We must understand the sheer weight of the consensus Turner was up against. Prominent biologists like Jacques Loeb were championing the theory of tropisms, the idea that animals were merely forced to move by external stimuli, like iron filings pulled by a magnet. Light hits the eye, the leg moves. Smell hits the antenna, the wing beats. There was no room in this mechanical equation for a mind. It was a cold, desolate worldview that stripped the vibration of life down to mere physics. But Turner, armed with a doctorate in zoology from the University of Chicago, the first African American to achieve such a feat, looked at a spider weaving a web and saw architecture, not just instinct. He looked at an ant finding its way home and saw geography, not just magnetism. He stood before the fortress of the Automaton Myth and prepared to dismantle it brick by brick. He didn't just want to study insects, he wanted to prove they possessed the one thing the world said they couldn't possibly have: a mind. The tragedy, as we sift through the dusted letters and ignored publications of the era, is that he was right. He had the evidence, he had the brilliance, but he was shouting into a void created by a society that believed neither a bug nor a black man could possibly hold the secrets of the universe. This is the story of how one man saw the soul in the machine and how the machine of history tried to crush him for it. If you search the records of the great universities of the early 20th century, you will not find Charles Henry Turner leading a department or guiding doctoral students in a mahogany-paneled office. The doors to those sanctuaries were locked tight, barred by the segregationist policies that infected every layer of American life. Despite his brilliant credentials, despite his publication record, Turner was effectively exiled from the ivory tower. But genius does not require a tower. It requires only curiosity and a relentless drive for truth. Denied a laboratory, Turner claimed the world as his workspace. His laboratory was O'Fallon Park in St. Louis. His workbench was a weathered park bench. His equipment was not made of German crystal or polished brass, but of discarded cardboard, scraps of paper, and cheap honey. It is a cinematic image that history should have immortalized, a solitary figure in a suit, sitting amidst the greenery, painstakingly arranging red and blue cardboard discs on the grass, waiting for the hum of wings. It was here, under the open sky, that Turner designed experiments of such elegant simplicity that they shamed the expensive complexities of modern science. He was determined to answer a question that had stumped the establishment. Do bees see color, or are they colorblind, attracted only to the brightness of a flower? The dogma said they were colorblind. Turner suspected otherwise. He trained honeybees to feed from specific colored discs filled with honey. Once the bees were trained, he switched the patterns. He removed the honey. He changed the brightness. He created a chaotic environment designed to confuse a simple reflex machine. But the bees were not confused. They returned to the specific colors they had learned, ignoring the brightness, ignoring the patterns. On that park bench, Turner proved that bees perceive color, a cognitive leap that implies a processing of visual information far beyond a simple reflex. He had looked into the alien eyes of an insect and found a viewer, not just a sensor. He didn't stop there. He turned his attention to the reviled cockroach. While the world stomped on them, Turner built them mazes. He constructed intricate boxes with blind alleys and punishers, treating the cockroach with the same seriousness a psychologist treats a rat. He observed them hour after hour, noting their hesitation. He watched them make mistakes, correct themselves, and, crucially, remember. He proved that cockroaches could learn to navigate a maze, retaining the memory of the correct path. This was not instinct. Instinct is born, but this knowledge was earned. It was learning. He went further, studying the hearing of moths and the homing abilities of ants. He demonstrated that ants didn't just stumble home, they navigated using landmarks and light, creating mental maps of their terrain. In one profound experiment, he showed that ants would stop to help a stricken comrade, hinting at a level of social awareness and perhaps even individual personality that was terrifying to the anthropocentric worldview of the time. Turner's genius lay in his ability to ask the right questions and answer them with almost zero budget. He proved that science is a methodology, not a location. But as he sat on that bench, recording data that would rewrite biology, the scientific community remained largely deaf. They read his papers, yes, he published over 70 of them, but they consumed his data without digesting his humanity. They took the facts and ignored the philosopher. He was proving that the lower orders had minds, all while working in a society that refused to fully acknowledge his own. The irony is as sharp as a sting. The man who showed the world that even a cockroach can learn was denied the opportunity to teach the world's brightest students.
The tragedy of Charles Henry Turner is not that he failed, it is that he succeeded and it didn't matter. The erasure of his legacy was not an accident. It was a passive, systemic silencing, a slow suffocation by a scientific community that practiced a polite but brutal form of exclusion. While his white contemporaries were granted sabbaticals, research grants, and armies of graduate assistants, Turner spent his days teaching biology at Sumner High School in St. Louis. He carried a crushing teaching load, grading papers late into the night, leaving him only the slivers of dawn and dusk to conduct the research that would fundamentally change our understanding of the animal mind. He was overworked, underpaid, and intellectually isolated. Yet he produced a volume of work that would define a tenure-track career today. But where is his name in the high school biology textbooks? Where is the Turner effect in the lexicon of entomology? It is missing. It was scrubbed out, overwritten by names that fit the profile of a great scientist in the eyes of the 20th century establishment. The most stinging example of this erasure involves the Nobel Prize. Decades after Turner sat on his park bench proving that bees see color and communicate, the Austrian ethologist Carl von Frisch conducted similar experiments. Von Frisch was celebrated as a visionary. He was hailed for discovering the sensory world of the honeybee. In 1973, Carl von Frisch was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for these discoveries. The world applauded. But in the dusty stacks of journals from the early 1900s, Charles Henry Turner's papers sat silently, bearing witness to the fact that a black man in St. Louis had reached the summit first. Turner had proven the core of von Frisch's work nearly a generation prior. He had done it without the funding, without the fame, and without the institutional support. Yet von Frisch is a household name in biology, and Turner is a footnote. This is not to say von Frisch stole the work directly, but rather that the scientific community's memory is selective. It remembers what it values, and for too long it did not value the contributions of a black scholar working in a segregated high school. Charles Henry Turner died in 1923 at the age of 56. The official cause was myocarditis, an inflammation of the heart muscle, but one cannot help but wonder if it was also a heart worn down by the sheer exertion of swimming upstream against a current of prejudice. He died before the civil rights movement could lift his name, before the modern era of ethology could validate his insights. He died believing in the truth of his work, even if the world wasn't ready to crown him for it. Today, we have a duty to correct the record. We are not just recounting history, we are performing an exorcism of the lies that buried him. Charles Henry Turner was not merely an assistant or a curiosity. He was a pioneer who shattered the myth of the biological automaton. He taught us that the world is full of minds, distinct and vibrant, hidden in the smallest of creatures. He showed us that intelligence is not a human monopoly, and in doing so, he proved that his own mind was one of the finest the world has ever ignored. We restore his name today, not as a charity, but as a necessity. Science demands truth, and the truth is, Turner was first.